Good evening, everybody. Hope you're all doing well. Welcome to my needs assessment presentation. I'm going to share my screen and we'll go ahead and get started with this. So hopefully you can see that. There we go. And I'm going to move to slideshow right there. Okay. And quite a bit has actually happened since I was coming up with the needs assessment proposal for my school and dealing with culturally responsive teaching practices. That's something that I was specifically looking at, and really looking at the actual needs assessment process that we're going on with our diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice committee and our diversity program at New City School, because we're actually in a process of we completed our self-study and for reaccreditation, and we're going through a process of hiring a director of diversity, equity, and community, which I'll talk about. And that's really kind of changed really what we're looking at and whether we should be looking at something specific tied to curriculum or looking at a needs assessment and a strategic plan for our diversity program in general before we can really get into some curricular practices. So I'm going to walk you through that. Again, I thought the readings were very helpful. I designed my needs assessment on identifying needs, prioritizing them, and then needs-based decision making. And I think that was where we have a potential problem, or something that's been persisting at New City School, is that as we've operated without real clarity about whose responsibility and roles it is with our diversity program, our decision making has been a little bit haphazard, and we found that in our self-study program. So I'm going to walk through that a little bit. This slide is from earlier, but just to familiarize again with New City School, its mission to inspire children to engage in joyful learning and achieve academic excellence while cultivating their personal strengths and passions, empower our students to build community and advocate for a more just and equitable world. And I would just point you to that diversity is one of the pillars of the school. Issues of equity and justice has been with the school since its founding in 1969 in the Central West End, and it's always sought to have a student body that is reflective of its community and the city of St. Louis, which has increasingly also been a challenge as populations has declined and the student population in city of St. Louis has declined. Although New City School, as an independent school, draws from a wide geographic footprint, and including 42 different zip codes, and has about 44% students of color. We've had, and so this is background research we've had before, but when we're looking at data as opposed to our needs research, again, we have a strategic plan that's been in place since 2018, and it had specific targets when it came to diversity and inclusion. And although we'd like to really get into the curricular aspect of that, which is in the gray part, talking about professional development for faculty and staff, really, understanding how this program is supposed to work and who's spearheading it continues to be really a driving, I don't want to say it's a problem, but it lacks clarity. And then that we keep seeing that in community surveys and in our assessment of inclusivity and multiculturalism that we presented. Again, I have a timeline here of actually everything that's taken place since 2018 to this past school year. And this is just some highlights of that, but we've done bias training all the way back in 2018 and 2019. They formed a new committee that took the place of a part-time director of diversity. We've had an outside consultant, Hackmat Consulting, Martha Hackmat, and who's continued to work with us and worked with us just recently on our professional development day a week ago from this past Friday. We've looked at racial literacy curriculum, different cultural literacy curriculums that operate at different levels within the curriculum. But again, who's having the purview to implement and guide the teachers with that? And we've had visiting scholars even this past year from WashU talking about DEI strategy. So there's been a lot of action steps, and it all seems to be moving forward. The issue is really whether it's cohesive. And I, again, pinpoint to some things I talked about earlier in the proposal, is that when we look at some of the key drivers from our climate surveys that we've done in the past, and in the most recent one, which I'm going to jump to here, we have these persisting low marks from our faculty. Teachers continue to indicate that they're not clear about the direction. They're not clear about who's making decisions about diversity, equity, inclusion, which has led to the need to hire a director of diversity and equity and community. And that process is actually going on right now. And I'm going to talk about some of the focus group conversations that we've been having. So I know this is kind of bridging the assignment of the needs assessment with actual work that's being done regarding a needs assessment at our school. But pertaining to faculty, the lack of clarity among faculty, and then that also grows into kind of a lack of community and collegiality amongst faculty regarding issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and what curricular pieces are there. Those are the persisting problems. So as much as I want to get into culturally responsive teaching, we're just not there yet until we address this problem. So I'm pinpointing some things that were actually, when we did a look at our self-study plan, which was last year into this year, we saw that teachers want a stronger community and a greater sense among themselves that they're understanding these issues and that they feel that they're all in the same place. There's this idea that people are in different places when it comes to not only, implementing culturally responsive teaching practices, but really, do they understand one another? Are they able to talk about issues of such as like microaggressions and how staff are treating one another? And this other highlighted here at the bottom right is that teachers have adequate support and adequate time to really practice this work. This was all done really into our Isaac self-study. And we've had a lot of things take place just here recently in the past few weeks, which I was able to collect some more pertinent data that kind of just reaffirmed that these issues are still going on and why we actually need to implement the plans and priorities that we found in our self-study last year. Again, that the needs assessment that we're talking about in this particular class is kind of overlapping with a genuine needs assessment that we're doing in our school regarding diversity and equity. So what's happened recently? On February 9th and February 13th, we had focus group dialogues, discussions with candidates for the diversity, equity, and community position. And so all the constituent groups met. The lower grade parents met on February 9th. The administrative team met. The extended day and staff, the board of trustees met. And on February 13th, the faculty had a meeting. Students were invited to a lunch, upper grade students, fourth, fifth, and sixth grade students. The DEIJ committee met, and I had a meeting with the head of school. In those meetings, what we found is that the different constituents, as to be expected, are in different places. The administration and the board is really seeking the kind of outward message of alignment to the pillar of diversity. We started last summer the Linda Churchwell Varga Summer Institute for Teachers of Color, looking to attract aspiring teachers of color to independent schools in New City. There's a summer institute in an effort to grow a more diverse faculty, not just at New City, but across the landscape. And that the new position is also has a role when it comes to enrollment and attracting students, particularly students of color, to New City, so that New City maintains a diverse student body. And that was the message that was being received in those focus groups dialogues with the admin and with the board of trustee. That was very different from what you found among the faculty and staff that were talking about collegiality among staff. Microaggressions came up about staff in different places, and we're not sure whether that's really that teachers are overwhelmed and swamped, or there's just really a lack of understanding amongst each other because teachers are actually doing so much. So it's still that red light that's indicator light is going off among our faculty and staff that we've seen in climate surveys now several times since 2018. Whereas also students and parents, they're giving a thumbs up that they actually feel very comfortable at New City School. They feel that although they want to continue to advocate that their child is being seen and heard, and that children of all diverse backgrounds are being seen and heard by at the school, they generally give the school very high marks. And students desire more choice and more opportunities. There's a desire to create a student government, student affinity groups, but those are all really positive ideas that are being brought forth because they see that that's possible. And so again, the key observations is that, there's the admin and board of trustees is wanting alignment, but the faculty and staff are still feeling disconnected. So the other thing that has happened is that on February 16th and February 17th, just this past week, we've had a dinner and dialogue with our entire community, not related to the director of diversity, but was planned in general. We have a dinner and dialogue session, both in the fall and in the spring, that's related to looking at diversity, but also community building. And our professional development day on February 17th was also devoted to diversity, reaffirming our community norms and rules to live by. And in going to both of these events, what I observed was that the community event, the dinner and dialogue with parents, again, was very positive, very affirming. Parents walked through scenarios of disrupting microaggressions that were generically tailored to create kind of cross-cultural dialogue. And parents viewed that as a very positive experience while they had pizza and broke into breakout sessions. We started in the theater and then went to breakout sessions in different classrooms, and it really ended on a very positive note, and we got a lot of positive feedback from the community. The professional development day started that way, but as faculty started dealing with microaggression scenarios that were a little closer to home, and the kind of lack of clarity that there was how we're planning all of this and where we stood with the director of diversity issues, it kind of hit a roadblock, and we really weren't able to get into some of the curricular practices that I was hoping to look at with my needs assessment. This slide here is really, I'm getting here to thinking about our SMART goals and thinking about where we move forward, because I have an abundance of data, an abundance of information and observations from these focus groups. We've got an abundance of survey data that we've used as climate survey data. I'm doing a professional development survey as part of my doctoral study. And I hesitated on launching another survey pertaining to this assignment. And what we're finding is that so a lot of the observations that I'm have are from the focus group conversations here. But in one of the practices we did was to go back to our quote unquote rules to live by, which are in red for our students, and our community norms, which are in black for our teachers. And that this is a process that this needs to be more of a regular practice amongst our faculty, that we're beginning and ending our faculty dialogues with, and really making sure that we're following our own rules to live by. And what that's able to do, and if you start talking about, again, where do we go from here with a SMART goal? Well, we have set SMART goals that we put in our New City School Isaac self-study last year. And coordinate, integrate DEIJ efforts with different groups, get the constituent groups together, recommitting to community engagement activities. I know those were kind of shut down during COVID. We have begun the Institute for Beginning Teachers of Color and expanded that to just really include all teachers of color. We've continued to develop our curriculum and pedagogical practices, but that's really a breakdown. I think that was listed as a SMART goal, but we really haven't implemented that. There's not a consensus among the faculty of which way we're doing, and we're in the process of getting a director of DEC to help do that. So I don't know if that can be listed as a, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely goal yet. And then we are hiring a director of diversity. We're going through that process. But so we have these SMART goals, but again, we can't get into the curricular piece until we solve these things. And I also think that over on the left, you see this process design and practice for our diversity, equity, and action. We need to make sure that is actually spinning and being practiced on a regular basis, that can hopefully build up that efficacy among the teachers. And then these are some other issues that came to my mind as I've observed this in terms of a needs assessment. And I've talked about this in my problem of practice. One is that, and it's actually why my problem of practice shifted to the professional development teachers and not specifically to DEIJ work, is that teachers are facing what's called a blizzard of guidance by Brick et al. And that as we look at all these problems and throw more and more and more and say the answer is always to add more and add more, that's becoming overwhelmed. And what we see that efficacy go down and the collegiality suffer, and teachers are feeling swamped. And I think this picture really indicates that. And so I think one of our key aspects is to just be aware that this is taking place. Another concern that we have is that as we institute these changes, over on the left, I've talked about this in my problem of practice too, that an 8-step change model over here of just going, let's create urgency, let's build a coalition, let's get this thing to have some quick wins and then make a change and embed the change. I think that's really like Sisyphus taking that boulder and trying to go up the hill. That might work with certain changes, but I don't know if that really works in an educational environment. Whereas on the right, the McKinsey 7S framework really talks about this cycle and pattern of hard S's, strategy, structure, and systems, and these soft S's of skills, staff, and style, always, creating this sense of shared values and shared compatibility, which is actually in the reading, the book review that I talked about, or I talked about this week. This that I'm also stressing here, kind of an outcome from my sense of a needs assessment, is that we need to do more regular empathetic listening. This actually comes from a in-service that I did related to music education and how it can apply to the other aspects of the curriculum. Is that we talk about empathetic listening, and we've seen, like, do an empathy map, but what does it mean to really listen? Well, musicians might have something to say regarding this. So Aaron Copland wrote a whole book called What to Listen For in Music, but this really coincides with kind of social and emotional, interpersonal and intrapersonal abilities to listen. So you see surface level listening, that's the beginning levels, what you hear and sense. The emotional level listening, what do you feel and what do you imagine the other person is feeling? And then getting this idea of listening for understanding. So I think these practice habits need to be occurring first before we really get into issues of culturally responsive teaching. So I bring this slide up with distinctions of equity. I was hoping we were going to be over here on the right, talking about culturally responsive education and some curricular pieces to do that. But, and maybe for some want to be over here on the left with multicultural education. I think we're in the middle regarding our faculty. And I don't mean in a grand sense social justice, but justice amongst ourselves, equity amongst ourselves as a faculty, that the teachers can be felt that they are being seen and heard. And I really don't think we're at a place to start talking about curriculum or a new curriculum until we repair some of those things. That's made me really rethink our the team that we've put together, that really needs to be, let me go back, not just a set team that I was looking at looking at culturally responsive teaching, but looking at everyone who's involved with our DEIJ team, and then the faculty at large. This is really a school-wide issue. And if I would go back, I'm going to go back to our SMART goals here for a second. I'm hopping all over. I kind of buried the lead here. But when it says SMART goals, I think what we have to really do is craft a new DEIJ strategic plan, and we have to do another needs assessment. I think we're going to need to loop back over, once the director of diversity comes on board, to start a listening campaign and to do a genuine needs assessment for our diversity pillar. And that needs assessment will also look at the curricular pieces. So, like I said, there's been lots of meetings that have taken on at this place. I've had a lot of dialogues and focus group sessions as we've looked at our program. I was hoping this would be about culturally responsive teaching, but I think part of this is recognizing is that you are where you are at, because that's where you're at. And I think the needs assessment, and we know from the design thinking process, is that it's iterative and it moves back and forth. And what we need to be thinking is, how can we really implement an actual needs assessment for our diversity program that gets faculty in a place where they can really begin thinking and talking about curriculum, because they feel that they have a collective sense of efficacy and the capabilities and the capacity and the time and space to talk about it. So I'm going to stop sharing for a moment and say that This is quite a learning experience, and I think that's the point of a needs assessment. And I don't want to say that the conclusion is we're kind of going back to the drawing board, but that really is what it is. And I think it would be inauthentic to say that, uh, we were able to do that. I think in my video reflection, I'll also share that, as we're trying to implement our own problem of practice, we're asking teachers to do surveys and participate in that we don't want to go back to the well over and over and over again, because that just adds another thing for teachers. And that's especially kind of tricky, in this mid third quarter when teachers are really grinding through things as they're going. So that's my presentation. I know it was kind of all across the map, but it has been very helpful to do this process, and I think it's going to help my particular school and my team. So thank you.